Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So, the long prophesied event is finally upon us. Dune has been released in US theaters, and I had the chance to see it in IMAX over the weekend, and my word, it was awesome. This was actually my first time back in the theater in over 2 years, and I can't think of a better movie to prompt that return. This video is going to be a weird hybrid of review / general talk about the movie, as I've still got a lot of processing going on up here, but I wanted to get my thoughts about the movie out there into the universe. This will include spoilers, which I'll mark with a timestamp, so if you've not read the book or seen the movie yet, you can skip that part. And let's start with general non-spoilery thoughts. First of all, is it worth seeing in theaters? Yes, absolutely. That's it. That's the whole video. Stop what you're doing, go see the movie right now in theaters. Basically everything about the movie was just brilliant. The cinematography, the aesthetics, the soundtrack were all just outstanding. It was a very immersive experience overall. The scale of everything is huge. There's a lot of immensity to basically everything in Dune, from spaceships to sandworms to even just individual rooms in buildings, and it was all done brilliantly. I was absolutely sucked in from the get-go. The acting was all around pretty good for the most part. There are a lot of big name actors in the story, not to mention a lot of characters to keep track of, and I was very pleased with the performances. I will say that for a non-book reader, the amount of characters may become a little overbearing, a little cumbersome, but you also have to kind of expect that from a movie like this. The story was translated to the screen very well. As a book reader, I came into this figuring I knew where the film would conclude, and I was mostly satisfied with the choice of how to end it. But again, if you have not read the book, the ending might feel a little bit flat, although I still liked it overall. And so to summarize this short non-spoiler overview, the movie is totally rad and you should definitely watch it in theaters. And now on to spoilery stuff for both the movie and the book. If you don't want to hear spoilers, you can safely skip ahead to this time. If you are still watching, that means you are one of the cool kids who's either seen the movie, read the book, or you're a total rebel. Either way, let's get to the spoilers. For the most part, a lot of scenes were translated in a very close way from the book, while some new stuff was also added to help expand on the world building. Obviously in a book you can slow down a bit more and explain things, but you can't really do that in a movie. So in the beginning we get a quick summary, a little bit of exposition of what the Harkonnens have done to Arrakis, followed by a scene of an Imperial envoy coming to announce the departure of the Atreides family to Arrakis. In my opinion, that all passes by fairly quickly, and since it's the beginning of the film, it's okay to have the slower exposition right up front, and it helps set up the whole galactic Imperium without dragging the pacing down. The Emperor and the Landsrod, which is the collection of nobles that make up the Empire, aren't really touched on here, but they're also not totally relevant to the story yet, so I was kind of okay with the reduced explanation. And then the Reverend Mother Helen Gaius Mohiam was also wrapped into this part as well. The scene with her and Paul and the Gom Jabbar was pushed back a little bit, mostly to dramatize it a little bit more and to put it closer to the departure to Arrakis. I think they did a fantastic job of displaying the voice in that part. That whole scene was actually done just really well. Plus, they showed Jessica's failure in the eyes of the Bene Gesserit for producing a son. They drop in the idea of the Kwisatz Haderach then too, which was great, as that provides a mystery moving forward and also explains why Paul is an important figure. Another change that I thought was well done was properly introducing Duncan Idaho prior to the departure to Arrakis. In the book, he's kind of more just talked about, but never really seen until they're already on Dune and he comes into the War Council meeting. In the film, we get to see him a bit more up front, establish his relationship with Paul, and then we learn he's going to Arrakis ahead of time to go find the Fremen and hopefully make a connection there. There were a few scenes that were just absolutely perfect to me. The use of the voice was always great. The hunter-seeker in Paul's bedroom was fantastic and was practically a one-to-one translation. The sequence I was personally looking forward to the most was actually the sand harvester part, because in the book that was both the Atreides and the reader's first real interaction with the sandworms, and oh my god, it was awesome. There was this really slow buildup of tension with the worm approaching, and then the tension just ramps up when the carrier ship can't pick up the harvester and Leto makes a decision to land and save the crew. They get everyone on board, and then they realize that Paul is still at the machine because he's having a spice-induced vision, and then the worm is just coming ever closer, and you see the sand dunes exploding and everything's shaking and vibrating. They manage to get back on the ornithopter as the massive worm maw just emerges from the sand beneath the harvester and just sucks up the whole thing, and you can really comprehend the size of the creatures. It was just so good! Other stuff that I liked, there was really good foreshadowing that was also done visually interesting to Jessica and her daughter and the ritual ritual that she'll eventually undergo. In the Harkonnen raid on Arrakeen, I actually really liked the slow bombs that kind of like drill through the shields. The trailers showed explosions at that part, so I was a little unsure how they're going to make that work with the shields, but the movie made it make sense. Duncan's involvement in more scenes was great, and he died like a total badass. There's a lot to love. I could continue with that forever, so let's move on. Here's some things that I found maybe that were unsatisfying, or maybe just a little less than fully satisfying. Thufir Hawat's role was really reduced, and I think that suffered most in the fallout of the Hunter-Seeker scene, because in the book, Leto is a little bit more even-tempered. He doesn't truly blame Hawat for the assassination attempt, and while in the movie he didn't let him resign out of shame either, he also didn't seem very charitable. But then it's funny because there's a part I really liked in that scene where Leto says the line, "They have tried to take the life of my son," because that's a repeated thought that he has in his narration of that part of the book, and I thought they did a great job of putting that onto screen. But overall, Thufir's dismissal was a bit too quick, a bit too harsh for me, and then his reduced role unfortunately left out an explanation of what a mentat actually is, which is basically a human computer slash assassin, and why they exist at all, which is because there are no thinking machines in this universe due to a machine uprising in the distant past. That sort of stuff isn't necessarily essential right now, so I can see why they kind of reduced it and left it out, but it does expand the world. More surprisingly was that the existence of the Spacing Guild and just their importance was very minimal. There's a bit with them in the beginning where they're mentioned as part of this transport to Arrakis, but after that there's a surprising lack of explanation as to why the spice is so important to them. Specifically, it's because it lets their navigators see safe pathways through space when they do faster than light travel. Speaking of spice, I don't think I heard any mention of CHOAM, which is like a giant megacorp that does spice harvesting on Arrakis, so I think they kind of got collapsed into the Harkonnen mining production. Again, not a huge loss, but still kind of noteworthy. The biggest one for me was that the Chris knife actually lacked a lot of significance. In the book, anyone who is not Fremen who lays eyes on a Chris knife is supposed to be killed. It was a little weird to me then that Shadow, Mapes, and Jessica had their mini confrontation with a guard present, because theoretically that guard should now need to be killed. And then the same thing happened with the introduction with Stilgar, where Duncan has a Chris knife. And that was a huge thing in the book because Duncan's possession of the knife, which he got from a dying Fremen who he had tried to help, linked him more strongly to the Sietch and basically made him kind of split his duties between Stilgar and Leto. Paul's vision of the Fremen fighting in the desert was a little strange visually. I think it was because the CG was simply more noticeable in that scene, and also that sort of like Power Rangers armor didn't quite feel right. And then I think the actual biggest weakness of the movie was that Dr. Yue's character was very reduced and was not fleshed out at all. I think he was on screen maybe 2 or 3 times for only like 2 or 3 minutes each, which didn't give us time to get to know him at all prior to his betrayal of the Atreides family. So his betrayal kind of comes out of nowhere in the movie, and it doesn't really hit that hard emotionally. And then last little nitpick for me, too much Chani slow-mo. Zendaya was basically just paid to walk around the desert, which, you know, good for her, I would do that. And it was a little odd. I don't mind the slow-mo and other visual effects since these are dreams and visions of Paul's, and you have to kind of set them apart from the regular narration, but there was a touch too much slow-mo for me. Those were kind of my larger weaknesses overall, some of them bigger than others, but none of them felt really too harsh, and none of them hurt the enjoyment of the film, and I was still thoroughly pleased with the experience by the end of it. When I knew that we were at the point where the film would be wrapping up, I was not ready to be done. I would have gladly sat through like 3 or 4 more hours of that movie to just keep going and finish the story. I am so excited for the next one, and I will be distraught if it does not happen. Overall, this film just really brought me back to other incredible theater experiences I've had, like seeing Lord of the Rings or like Avengers Endgame. As much as I enjoyed it though, I will say I would rather they just finish this as 2 movies instead of stretching it out into 3. I heard a very loose rumor that a 3rd movie could possibly be more of a Dune Messiah adaptation rather than a stretched out Dune, which would be cool, but if they adapt Messiah, I would actually rather they go all in and adapt Children of Dune as well. Books 2 and 3 are really much more connected to each other, possibly more than even books 1 and 2 to each other, and I think it would be better to either adapt neither of them or both of them. Bottom line, I want more. My hype, much like the spice, must flow. That is all for today. I hope you've enjoyed my rambling thoughts on the Dune movie. If you did, please consider giving the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more of my thoughts on various stories, including more things in the Dune universe. Leave a comment below if you've seen the movie and let me know your thoughts on it. What things worked for you, what things didn't work for you, or feel free to just say hello. I post videos on Sunday and Wednesday. Until next time, I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I will catch you here in the next video.